Hey guys, it's been a while since I've done a tutorial. I've been very busy with a lot of projects, but in doing one of those projects, one of my employees and I, Alan, and a lot of this goes out to him for coming up with this, we made a plugin for jQuery called SuperLive, and I want to show you what SuperLive is today because I think it's the coolest thing. Note, this does not work in any version of Internet Explorer, okay? So if you need to develop for Internet Explorer, ignore this. But for all other browsers, this is awesome. What is SuperLive? SuperLive is the ability to make something that isn't live, live. Now, if you know what live is, then you kind of know what I'm talking about. So let's go through a quick scenario here. Okay? You've got a very simple page. You've got a button, another button, and then you're going to have buttons that get created because of other buttons. Okay? And that's on live. So what we have here is we're going to get every button, and we're going to attach a click listener to it, and it's going to just add buttons. That's what it's going to do, is just add buttons. Okay? Now, it's live because as we add new buttons, we should be able to click those new buttons, and this should still happen. And that is the perfect scenario to use live. It adds a listener to an object no matter when it was created. Okay? Now, we're going to say, well, what's that listener going to be? Well, that listener is just a click, and all it's going to do, I'll actually comment this out for now because it's not appropriate right now. All we're doing is a button should create another button. That's it. So if we refresh, we can see this button creates a button, this button creates a button, and these new buttons, they also create buttons. As in, the listener is still being applied even though these never existed. Okay? That's what live does. Now, let's take another scenario for a second. What happens if you have a plugin and you want to make that live? Like, for example, this is a tip plugin, and all it does is it applies a cool tooltip when I hover over. So this is a cool tooltip plugin. Now, what happens if I want to make the plugin live? So if I click to add a new button, where's my tooltip? Why isn't my tooltip the same? Why didn't the plugin get applied? Well, that's because the plugin isn't live. And there's no jQuery live thing you can do right now to make this live. There's no listener for apply plugin. You know, there's nothing you can do. So that's what SuperLive does. SuperLive allows us, okay, SuperLive allows us to apply stuff like plugins no matter when they exist. So how do you use it? Well, we've just seen how it doesn't work, right? I've created new buttons, and new buttons get created, but they don't actually apply, even though it's the correct listener. So what do you do? Well, you use your same listener, like this, and instead of doing the plugin, you do .superlive, right, which is the plugin that we made, and you wrap that in a function, like that. And then inside of here, that's when you would do this .tip, right? You actually apply your plugin now. So we don't need this anymore, not used, and we've just applied via SuperLive. And SuperLive is a JavaScript that's included up here, which I'll go over in a minute. I'm actually going to write the whole thing with you because it's not a lot of code. That's SuperLive, pretty short. So let me actually show you now what happens. So if I refresh, I have my tooltips, okay? And if I click, oh look, I still have a tooltip. So it actually detected when a new element was added and it applied that plugin to it. This is very cool. So let me show you how this works. I'll go over the code and then I'll actually write the code with you, okay, for those of you who want to know. So SuperLive basically can take a couple parameters. It will load the plugin, or it'll load the callback when when the page first loads, when a new element is inserted into the page, and when an element is modified. Okay? So if you have a select box that has a value on it, and you want something to happen when that value changes, you can use SuperLive. And if you have a plugin that needs to use the value of a select box, for example, there's a really cool plugin I like to use called it's like uniform jQuery, sexy forms. Here it is. This plugin has a condition on it where it says right here, uniform cannot automatically sniff out dynamic value changes. If you want to make changes to elements in JavaScript or using reset button or some kind, remember to call uniform.update. This is terrible. So this plugin does a great job of giving you really nice looking forms, but God forbid you change the value dynamically, you gotta call update again. And if you do that in 50 different places, you gotta call update in 50 different places. SuperLive would fix all of that. It allows you to call it just once, and it applies it every time it changes. It's a beautiful thing. So let's actually dive into the code of how SuperLive works. I'm going to delete this and write it with you. So the first thing we're going to do is have our jQuery function wrapper. Now, because this is going to be a distributed plugin, I'm going to give this away to you guys. I'm actually going to wrap it a little bit differently than you're used to. So this is, and Alan started to get me to do this. This is how you really write a plugin. It actually passes the jQuery object into the function. So it's very useful this way. So $fn.superlive, again, this is how you write a function, equals. Okay, and I will get to the parameters later. For now, SuperLive. So first thing we have to do is, it's really, really simple. And then we do some extra stuff. So the simple part is, we are going to attach to the body a .on, which is new in jQuery 1.7, which is like delegate and which is like live. But the listener we're going to search for is DOM node inserted. Okay, this is a mutation listener, and what we're going to do is we're going to listen for that and affect only this .selector, which is an internal thing for a plugin. It actually says, I want to know DOM nodes that are inserted that apply to the selector that I'm passing here. Okay, and then I want to call a function which is going to be callback, and that is all you have to do. That's all SuperLive is really doing for a node inserted. Now we do another clause, which is on the body. We do an on clause, and we're doing another one called DOM attribute modified. Okay, and what this does, same thing, is this detects when an attribute is modified, which is perfect for if an element has been modified, SuperLive will execute again. It'll update. One more thing you have to do, and that's when the document loads, because this is when a node is inserted, this is when a node is modified. So what about when the node is already there? Well, that's what the load is for. So that's just going to be callback.call this. We're basically saying our function, we want to call it in the scope of our selector. Now this is a little internal, and I get that, and I don't expect you to really understand it, but that's fine. This loads on load, on page load. So we say on page load, and this is when modified, and this is when inserted. It's all very simple stuff. Now you're wondering why I had so much code before, right? Well, we had some conditions in here, so we basically allowed you to pass in whether you wanted, well, what's the callback, right? We let you say, do you want to have the load, do you want to have the inserted, and do you want to have the modified? So maybe you don't want all these things to happen, so we do that, and then we have a really slick little statement here to reverse those, because you want to say I don't want load, or I don't want inserted, or I don't want modified. So we kind of reverse all those right here, right? And these should all be, oh no, they don't need to do var. Yeah, they don't need to do var because they're already here. Okay, now the last thing you want to ask yourself is, what was the rest of that code? Well, the rest of that code was DOM attribute modified written out for real, and I'm going to paste that in because I didn't write this part, but I think it's important. Not all browsers allow DOM attribute modified, but it's very easy to add. This is all it is. First you detect whether it's there or not, so you detect whether it's there or not. Then you add a prototype to the set attribute, and you add that to a function. You create a mutation event. This is the part right here that doesn't work in Internet Explorer. I'm sure someone else could rewrite this to work in Internet Explorer, but I don't care, so I'm not going to. Then it gets the attribute and actually inits the DOM attribute modified event and dispatches it, which will then cause this to happen. So this is just a backup scenario in case your browser does not have DOM attribute modified. And this is SuperLive, and I think it's awesome. And I'm going to release it to you guys online so you can have it. Again, if someone wants to do a modification for Internet Explorer, more power to you. And again, super special thanks to Alan Mackley for helping me with this. He pretty much wrote most of this, and he did all the research for it. So I'm really happy it works, and it's been wonderful for my projects. So enjoy SuperLive. Ask me any questions you need. Thanks.